underappreciated tools that we've got in the ambulance. It's underutilized given all the different functions that it's got, and there are so many different ways that we can actually use this guy. So the purpose of this training is to just look at some of the basic functions. We're not going to go into things like doing a 12 lead or anything like that because that's under the medic supervision. But a lot of this stuff is going to be performed, can be performed on a lot more calls than it's actually being used on. So there are two basic functions to the Lifepack. The first general function is the AED or defibrillation mode. Under that mode, we can provide a shock, just like we would with our smaller AEDs. So, just like we would on the little ones, as you turn it on, let me turn it off before I turn it on. You'll notice that right as we turn it on, it'll automatically go into the defibrillation mode, and it'll say, connect electrodes. That was really nice listening. I didn't get a good response there. All right, so the defibrillation mode right here, you'll notice that the pads, which are going to be over here in the corner, are going to be, you're just going to want to take these guys out and apply them just like you would for any other AED. You'll notice that the Lifepack is pretty much identical in terms of its AED functionalities to the smaller AEDs as well. So these are going to be right over here. Take this out, take it out of the bag, and then apply one up here, one over here, just like you would for any other with any other defibrillation tool. So these it's preferable to be doing this with the adults. If you had an adult size patient who's in cardiac arrest, if you had a pediatric who's in cardiac arrest, we don't have the pediatric dose attenuators for this, so the shock would be identical. However, we do have pediatric-sized pads for the Lifepack. So you can take off the adult and put on the pediatric one instead. However, the shock is going to be the same size. So the only benefit is that you can actually fit the two pads on the chest. But there's no huge benefit to that. So that's generally your defibrillation mode. Now, the last couple things is that your two buttons here, analyze and shock, just like our smaller ones, are right over here. You'd press analyze once the electrodes are attached, and then you would shock, whether it tells you to shock or not. So you do that according to the analysis. That's pretty much defibrillation. Now, when you're done with defibrillation, in order to take it out of AED mode, we're going to press advisory right over here. Now, you can do that right after you've turned it on, so you just press on advisory, and now it goes back into patient monitoring mode. Under this mode, we can take advantage of a lot of the different tools that are all laid out here and scrolled out as I've been doing this all day. But let's start off with the BP. Now, you'll notice right here it's going to say this side to patient. So that's going to be the side that is obviously going to be in contact with the patient's skin, and we're going to just wrap it around just like we would a manual BP cuff. Now, it's important to note that we must take a manual set of vitals and manual BP, take a manual pulse prior to using the Lifepack and using the kind of the automated BP. Now, this will just be wrapped around, and then this white line right here should be right about where you palpate that brachial artery. So you don't want to be too low or too high. So right about here is going to be your ideal place. So the BP, relatively simple. Now, in order to cycle the BP, you're going to press right over here, NIBP, and it'll just give you a reading right over to the side. It'll pump itself up, and then it'll kind of slowly release itself as it determines the reading for the blood pressure. That's the BP. Now, the pulse ox, right over here, is, for those of you who don't know, a tool for determining the amount of oxygen saturation in the blood. We're just going to open it up just like that and insert a finger. Now, once your finger is inserted, over to the left side is going to pop up a little bar that's going to give you a number next to it. Out of 100, it's a percentage, and it's going to tell you how many of the hemoglobins in your blood are actually saturated with oxygen. So it's going to give you a good sense as to how much oxygen is actually in the system. So that's the purpose of this guy. And now there are no buttons over here that you need to worry about. It'll just automatically pop up as you, after you insert the finger. Let's see. Next thing, 4 lead right here. The forelead is going to be, again, typically under medic supervision. We're going to have the stickies over here on the outside pocket. So it comes with 5s in case you mess up one. And then you would just kind of open up the bag, apply this piece to the sticky, and then apply it to the 4 different limbs. So you'll have the right arm, right leg, left arm, left leg. Now, ideally, you'd want to get the stickies down and low on the patient's limbs. So the best spot would be right over here, right over here, right over here, and right over here. However, some medics will tell you otherwise, and that's because they're concerned about patients' movement, whether they're combative or they're seizing or they're just kind of moving around a lot. Then it's better to have it higher up because you'll have interference and you won't get a very good picture of the electrical activity in the heart, because that's what the forelead is essentially doing. It's taking a picture of the electrical activity in the heart. So by applying this, you're going to get a good solid picture as to what's really going on, and then you can note if there are any abnormalities. So if the patient is moving around a lot, then you'd go kind of higher up. But most of the time, unless the medic tells you otherwise, go kind of lower and inside when you actually apply your forelead. You've also got a 12 lead, which we keep the cords right over here in the back. And then you can just apply that the medic is going to be applying that to the chest because that is not a BLS skill that we need to be worrying about. So the last little thing right over here is we've got a capnography monitoring device right over here. The purpose of capnography is to determine how much CO2 is being blown off with each of your breaths. So it'll basically tell you the concentration of carbon dioxide that's being released. Now, the purpose of this is that it gives you a lot more information than just looking at the O2 sat, because the carbon dioxide is the byproduct of metabolism in the body. So if the body's metabolism is good, then you'll notice that the capnography reading is going to be relatively high. You're going to be blowing off a good amount of CO2. It should be right around 40 in terms of numerical sense. And then you should be getting a good reading as to how much of that oxygen in the body is actually being effectively used. Because knowing how much oxygen in the blood is great, but knowing how much of that is being used is even better. And that's the purpose of the capnography. Now, again, this is going to be done with a medic supervision, but it essentially works like a nasal cannula, and it monitors how much CO2 is being exhaled with each breath.
So
now,
that's how it goes on?
Yes. Yes. And typically, medics will actually put on a capnography monitor and a nasal cannula at the same time. So they'll sometimes kind of double up. Last thing is how to perform the user test. Now, this is technically the 50's responsibility at 5:30 every night. But if you're EMT and you're doing your checkout and you kind of want to be proactive and on top of your game, you'll press right over here, Options, and scroll over to User Test. Select right there and have that print out. Now, the user test is going to give you a reading as to whether the Lifepack is capable. It's self-testing to see whether it's capable of providing a shock. So typically in about 3 or 4 minutes, it'll print out a little piece. Now here it's a lot quicker since I just did this a couple minutes ago. And then you've got your user test. It'll say up here, user test passed. And on it, you'll write the date and the unit number. The 50 is going to be doing this in all 3 ambulances. So if you have a little bit of extra time, go through the 3 different ambulances, do the user test, and then hand this to the 50, once they're at 5:30, once they're ready to start their shift. So it's a good way to be nice and proactive. Any questions on the Lifepack?